Today we are covering structural balance. So you want to play better hockey, just not being taught the way that they're intended to be, or you probably should be getting, but you're not. But you see these other players who are getting it, and you're like, why can't I be like them? Well, this series is for you. So structural balance, mostly used for the work inside of the gym. I'm going to quote Charles Poliquin. Structural balance refers to the major muscles of the body being in balance with each other. This means balance between opposing muscle pairs, such as the biceps and the triceps of the arms, the quadriceps and the hamstrings of the legs, and also between the limbs, so the right and the left leg, or the right and the left arm. So inside of structural balance, it is not enough to just have the proper strength ratio between the hamstrings and the quads, for example, but you need to have the proper strength of the quads and hamstrings on the right leg in relation to the quads and the hamstrings on the left leg. And that applies to the upper body as well. So how does this fit into something like hockey? The biggest thing is that it is hard to play intense hockey and not have your quads hypertrophy mid-season. Hockey is one of those sports where you will get quad development just by playing the sport. And this is true, say, of skiing. This is also true, say, of rock climbing with the forearms. This is also true of basketball with people's calves, sprinters with hamstrings, and many other sports like that too. For hockey specifically, we know it's the quads. We've seen plenty of pictures from many players where their quads develop like massively. But does this mean that you should not work on your quads or do quad exercises, such as squats or deadlifts, for example? Actually, no. This means you should keep working on them, but is it necessarily a priority? Well, that depends on you, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, in all likelihood, just from playing hockey, your quads are very likely not going to be the weak link inside of the structural chain. The basic point of structural balance is to find your weak link and make it no longer a weak link. It's to make it your strongest area. To go from what you suck at to now what you can be very good at. And the importance of this also puts precedence in understanding that you are only as strong as your weakest link. If you make the weak link stronger, well, it's not going to be a weak link anymore. Therefore, you're not going to have to worry about that being your weakest link. You're going to be a lot stronger. You'll be a lot more prepared for the specific area, and it's not going to be a problem for you because, well, you turned it from a weak link into a strong link. And this is actually where ATG comes in, where you intentionally train your weak links so that what you were worst at will now become what you're best at by balancing the body through exercise. To give you my example of how I incorporate all this structural balance, I found out that it was my low back that was a major weak link. What ATG has done is create a calculator based off of different lifts that they use, and then you can plug in a certain number that you're currently hitting or that you want to hit, and then it details out every single exercise that they have and that you need to hit the numbers on specifically. What I found out was that, one, my hips were very weak, my low back was very weak, my hamstrings were weak compared to my quads, and also my upper body was weak. So some easy metrics to find out there was not only what you would be able to look at with the eye test with my squats, where my low back would cave in first before my quads would, but you would see this in the numbers also. So for a long time, my front squat structurally was weaker than my back squat. Now that has reversed, but point being is that a front squat is much harder on the nervous system, and it uses more of your back muscles, and that was weaker for me because I never trained the low back until I did all this programming. And as of this recording, that is still something I'm looking to get as strong as possible. It's never a bad thing to have a stronger low back. You can just continue to keep strengthening it. A lot of things are going to improve from it. But for me, that was and even still to this day is a weak link that I'm progressing. A good one, for example, I could pull it up, is that a 45-degree back extension, roughly speaking, should be about the same weight as an HG split squat. Now, my best HG split squat was 200 pounds. My best back extension to this point is 140 for 6. When I hit 200 pounds for the HG split squat, that was about 3 reps. So I would say I'd be able to hit 180 for 6 reps. So it's about, as of this recording, it's about 30 pounds off of where it should be. Last year at this point, my back extension was only at 100 pounds for about 6 reps, which is hard. So that's gotten stronger very quickly. In addition to my hamstrings as both knee flexors and even hip extensors to a certain point, although generally speaking, all of my hip extension is weak. So on the hamstring curls, it's about half of what you can do on your back squat for 3 reps. 3 reps on the hamstring curl is about half of what you can do on your back squat. This is for double leg hamstring curls. If I were to do 315 pounds for 3 reps on a back squat, you need about 173 pounds on the hamstring curl for 3 reps. I can do that now. Absolutely. That was hard over a year ago. But you also need the upper body structurally balanced with the lower body. And that's, typically speaking, on a barbell incline press, you need that at about 85% of your front squat. And the front squat is about 85% of the back squat. While my front squat has gotten up to about 300 pounds for a single rep, my incline press theoretically should be at 255 pounds. And I'm not there yet. I can barely crack 200 pounds for 2 reps on my incline press. So that's how much I've neglected my upper body. Those numbers are there so that the upper body can oppose the lower body like it should, so that you can keep moving forward. As we looked at a little bit in skating and what we'll look at in shooting as well, the upper body and lower body oppose each other in a type of rotation. And if you get these numbers high enough and matching structurally with each other enough, your performance on the ice actually improves greatly. So that was my example. For you, it will be different. And that's the genius behind this. This makes a major case for customized coaching and why it doesn't make sense to do all these team practices where everyone's doing basically the same movements. Do people do different weights on team exercises? Absolutely they do. But if we take what structural balance gives us here, where it's expanded off and catered to everyone's personal needs, everyone has different needs. If everyone's different, you have different needs, even as an athlete. And if you're all doing the same thing, even if it's different weights, are you going to progress as well as maybe you should, or maybe you could? I don't think you can. So that's the important concept behind this, is that it will be different for you. The structural balance weak links will be different for you. I had no problems with my shoulders. A lot of hockey players have problems with their shoulders. I had no problems with my knees. Let's say you get a knee-on-knee collision and you need that to be rehabbed. Well, that's going to affect your structural balance numbers, first off. And secondly, that is now your newest weak link that you need to make into a strong link. So structural balance tells you that there is always something to work on, whether you're genetically gifted or not. Charles Poliquin was saying that out of all of his clients, I think it was less than 1% of people were structurally balanced when they walked in to work with him. So that's how rare it is to be already structurally balanced. So imagine let's say you are. When in doubt, you don't know what to do, there's no problem getting stronger. but you're probably not in that 1%. You're probably structurally, if you're watching this, you're not in that 1%. Because, well, I wasn't. And I was hurt a lot. And you follow me because you want to get better. This is a way to get better. This is also something we focus on in the Hockey Hack system. My progressions for this is that we look at your movements, determining what you can and what you can't do in many different exercises that I test out. Every single training assessment that I have in person is an assessment of your abilities. And they change day to day. It's like we got to determine what is strong and weak and be able to fix injuries if there are any. And things can change at any moment also. So because of that, that is why I treat every session as an assessment. After structural balance, we then focus on accumulating, building the engine, adding muscles, power, tolerance to load with a lot shorter rest times. Also in this phase, we do what you're good at. We nail down and just lock in what you're really good at, which is going to help build up the engine, as we'll just use that analogy. After accumulation, we have an intensification, which is adding power to the engine. We do more central nervous system work, so that's putting weight on the bar, training your body's ability to lift something heavy. You can also do some speed with this. So say, for example, you're running a 100-meter dash and you're measuring how short that distance will take. That's also something inside of this intensification phase. But instead of with 100-meter dash, in that case, it's going to be with numbers on the bar or even with different Olympic lifts, dare I say. This is also a phase that needs more recovery. So there's going to be much longer rest times, sometimes up to 5 minutes, depending on the workout in the program. And like I said earlier, custom clients get customized structural balance, accumulation, intensification phases. What I do online is 4 to 6 week blocks. And then what I do in person is 2 to 4 week blocks. The reason I have it slightly longer online is for a compliance reason. It is much harder for me to track what's going on online, whereas in person, we can make adjustments on the fly because we're right there and then. Online, my system, while it allows you to train anywhere, it is a slower feedback process. We need to acknowledge that. But it is hard to get me in person. I'm in high demand at the moment, even though I'd love to train as many people as possible. So if you train with me, those are your two choices. You can either work with me online, get slightly slower feedback, but still use very similar programs to what I use in person. And then if you do happen to see me in person, you will get a faster feedback loop, but it's much harder to get me in person, provided you don't live in the same city that I do. To conclude, how do we incorporate structural balance around hockey legs? Well, to take a concept from A to G and how we work from the ground up, we can strengthen the lower legs first, which atrophy mid-season. The lower legs will atrophy in hockey players mid-season. The calves weaken, especially if you don't work on them. They don't activate the same way, say, they do, say, if you're running or sprinting or jumping, because there is no running or sprinting or jumping in hockey. Maybe sprinting, but you don't use your calves in hockey. It's the same thing that happens with skiing, which is why there have been a pretty concerning increase in Achilles injuries and off-ice training from NHLers, is because they don't focus nearly enough as they should on the lower legs. So to prevent that, we train the living crap out of the lower legs so that they're structurally balanced with the quads and the hamstrings, which are much more powerful. And those muscles, the quads especially, will hypertrophy in season as a hockey player. So the lower legs have to be balanced out, especially if they weaken and atrophy. Hamstrings also need to be trained in knee flexion and hip extension to balance out the quads. I would say the hamstrings need to be stronger than the quads. in order to be properly balanced. And it gives you as a hockey player a lot more speed, a lot more an advantage over the competition. Say if you have like very strong hamstrings, which work very well in horizontal speed. Low back strength, which directly correlates to skating speed, which is what the seated good morning does, and also just general low back strength with any back extension, any deadlift, any good morning, all of that. Strengthen the low back. You also need to strengthen your hips to be able to pick up hockey legs. So you need the seated good morning, you need the low cable pull-in or reverse squat. You also need general maintenance, say if you use a good incline pigeon or piriformis groin stretch. You need all of that to be balanced out so that they can handle the weights or handle the adaptation that your quads are getting. You also need your upper body balanced with your lower body. Much like the calves, much like the lower legs, the upper body doesn't really get used that much with hockey. Now, there are some correlations with pull-ups being correlated to shot power. There's also the correlation between the incline press, if it's structurally balanced, helping out your skating speed, because now you can have the upper body oppose the lower body properly. So it's just a good idea to get the upper body stronger. Once you've done all of that, you just continue to get measurably stronger. And what's cool about all these measurements is that you can see your progress over time. And that's a genius behind these standards. So that was structural balance in a nutshell and how it relates to hockey. Basically, everything has to be balanced out around those ever so growing quads, which they hypertrophy mid-season, so everything else has to be balanced out around them. And it's also not that you should not work on your quads, because I do think you need to squat. I do think you need to use that HEG split squat and keep a good maintenance on the knees. But everything else, including your weakest link, needs to be the priority before you work on your quads further. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video in this series.